Hello, my name is Harry, and this is Learn English with British Harry. I hope you're well. And today, this is a bit of a last minute stream, but I thought it would be quite interesting to discuss daily routines. Now, let's have a look at this here. So, I have some example routines for you to go through. And then I thought it would be quite interesting to have a look at someone who is quite interesting, a guy called Brian Johnson, who is aiming to live forever. But before we get into that, let's have a look at this here. So, Bob is an IT manager. Let me just get this up here. So, Bob is an IT manager living in the heart of London. Every weekday, he wakes up at 6:30 a.m. just as the early morning starts to creep through his bedroom window. So this is a nice word here, creep. So the light slowly starts to come in through his bedroom window. After a quick shower, he brews himself a strong cup of coffee and eats a simple breakfast, often a bowl of porridge or a slice of toast with marmalade. Let me know, what do you eat in the morning for your daily routine? What do you like to eat in the morning? I know some people don't like to eat. Some people do intermittent fasting. So, intermittent fasting is when you don't eat for a prolonged period of time. Myself, I quite like to have a cup of coffee. Before that, I'd have a glass of water to get hydrated, and then a nice cup of coffee. And I can't really eat straight away. It takes me a few hours before I can start to eat something. Okay. Bob takes a tube to his office in Canary Wharf, where he arrives by 8:30, just as the city is bustling with people rushing to work. So, bustling, people are very busy. It's not a quiet time, so lots of people are rushing to work. At the office, he spends his morning checking emails, attending meetings, and troubleshooting any urgent IT issues that pop up. His role is demanding, but Bob enjoys the challenge and takes pride in helping his colleagues keep everything running smoothly. Lunch is usually a quick sandwich at his desk. Now, this is quite common. A lot of people seem to have lunch at their desk, and it's not really a good thing because you don't have that break away from work and you're constantly having to work. So, what about yourself? Do you like to take your lunch and have your lunch at another location, or do you have your lunch at your desk? Okay, so let's carry on here. Or sometimes he'll meet a colleague for a bite at a nearby cafe. In the afternoons, Bob focuses on bigger projects like improving the company's network security or planning software updates. He always makes time for a cup of tea around 3 p.m., a small break that he finds refreshing. And I think having that small break in the UK, it's very common to have some tea or quite a lot of tea. And it's a nice break, especially when it's cold. It feels like a nice warm hug to have a nice cup of tea, but you have to be careful not to eat too many biscuits. By 5:30, Bob wraps up for the day and heads home, often listening to a podcast on the tube. Evenings are for unwinding. he might cook up a simple dinner, read a book, or catch up on a bit of telly before calling it a night. Bob's routine may be predictable, but he finds comfort in the rhythm of city life, balancing work with a touch of leisure. So, Bob's daily routine is something which is quite common if you are working the traditional 9 to 5. So, in terms of your morning routine, again, let me know what is your morning routine. And I think this is a really good exercise to imagine. You can write down your own routine, but you can also imagine someone else's routine. You can pick a fictional name, a fictional job, and write down that routine. It can really help and force you to think about things in different ways, and new vocabulary will also crop up. So, from my perspective, he seems to be having a busy, very busy day. His day to day life is quite busy. However, he says that, well, his routine may be predictable. Now, if something is predictable, you know what to expect. So there are no surprises. And sometimes having that predictability can be quite comforting. So you know what to expect. And I think this is why routines are so good, because in a general day, you have to make so many decisions: what to eat, what to wear. And on top of that, you then have to make decisions at work. So if you can minimize the amount of decisions you have to make, it makes your day a lot easier to navigate. It's less stressful. And again, it says here that he finds comfort in the rhythm of city life. So he's balancing his work and he's balancing his leisure time. Some people may find this a bit boring. What do you think about Bob's daily routine? Is it boring? He has some excitement there. He's listening to a podcast on the tube, and podcasts are a fantastic way to improve your English. I also have a podcast, so on my channel, and you can have a look at that. It's quite interesting. So if you're traveling or if you are doing housework, it's quite nice to listen to. Okay, so let's have a look at Sarah. So Sarah is a marketing officer living in a cozy flat near London Bridge. So a cozy flat. So to me, cozy here is something which is quite welcoming. It's very relaxing. She starts her mornings around 7 o'clock in the morning with a short jog along the Thames, enjoying the fresh air and views of the city. After her run, she makes herself a smoothie, blending up fruit, oats, and a handful of spinach, which she says gives her energy she needs for the busy day ahead. So if we compare Sarah's morning with Bob's morning. So Bob has a simple breakfast, and Sarah's breakfast is a bit more complicated, but she's blending up a smoothie, and it sounds quite healthy. Sarah usually takes a bus to her office in Shoreditch, which gives her time to read or listen to her favorite playlist. By 9 a.m., she's at her desk, scrolling through emails and planning the day's tasks. Her mornings are filled with brainstorming sessions and creative meetings, where she works with her team on new campaigns and social media strategies. She's always thinking of fresh ways to engage customers, and her colleagues say she brings brilliant ideas to the table. So this phrase here, bring ideas to the table, it's quite common. If you think about in today's workplace. It's all about bringing value. So you have a job, you do certain tasks, and this phrase, what do you bring to the table? If you think about an actual table, if you are not bringing any, metaphorically, if you're not bringing any bread, any milk to the table, then you're coming to the table empty handed and you're not bringing anything to the table. So if you can bring some ideas like Sarah can, she is valued. At lunchtime, Sarah likes to go out for a walk, often grabbing a salad or sushi from a local spot and catching up with friends if they're nearby. Her afternoons are focused on designing marketing materials, tracking analytics, and making sure campaigns are on schedule. She finds the work rewarding, especially when she sees the positive results her team efforts bring. Around 6 o'clock in the evening, Sarah wraps up and heads home. Some evenings she goes to a yoga class, while other nights she meets friends for dinner at one of London's endless choices of restaurants. When she's back home, she often unwinds by watching a film or practicing a bit of her cooking skills. For Sarah, each day is a balance of creativity and connection, with her work, friends, and the buzz of London bringing excitement to her routine. So we can see here that Sarah's day is a bit more exciting. So let me know, which do you prefer? Do you prefer Bob's routine, which seems to be quite, I wouldn't say quite boring. Some people may think it's boring, but it's predictable. Sarah, her routine seems to be a bit more interesting, a bit more lively. She's going out, she's enjoying the city life, and she does a few more things. So here, I want you to think about your daily routine from the morning until you go to sleep. So what time do you wake up? You can add some adverbs of frequency here. You can let me know what time you usually wake up. Do you always wake up at a certain time? Does it ever change? So on a weekday, on a work day, you always wake up at a certain time, but on the weekend, does it change? Do you sometimes wake up at a different time? Do you even set the alarm clock? I know it's quite nice sometimes not to set the alarm clock. I have a routine where I like to wake up fairly early, and I find it very peaceful in the mornings before everyone is awake and the world is awake. I find it peaceful to catch up on the tasks that I have to do and have some quiet alone time. I think it's changed from when I was younger. When I was younger, I would often go to sleep late and then wake up late. And that's changed to going to sleep earlier and waking up earlier. So if we go back to Sarah and have a look at her day. So she starts work a little bit later than Bob, and her mornings are filled with brainstorming sessions. So when you brainstorm, you think of different ideas. And I can see that her job seems to be coming up with a lot of ideas. So she's always thinking of fresh ways to engage customers. So this can be quite stressful. So after a stressful day, I assume that her way to de-stress is going out. Whereas with Bob, I think that his day generally, so an IT manager, I can imagine, can be quite stressful because he is troubleshooting. So when you troubleshoot, you try to solve the problem. You try to think of solutions to the problem, and that as well can be very mentally draining. And he's having to deal with any urgent issues that pop up. So here we could use some phrasal verbs such as gravitate towards. So you can use this instead of I prefer. So for example, if at the end of the day, you could say, I prefer to go home and watch some TV. You could say, I like to gravitate, or I gravitate towards having a cozy night in and relaxing on the couch. Or you could gravitate towards being more social. I gravitate towards going out and meeting friends and socializing. Now, I'm quite interested at looking at other people's routines. And in society and in media, you often hear of successful people that wake up incredibly early, and this is one of the main reasons that they are successful. I don't think this is the case, but in pop culture, we generally have that feeling. So this person here, this is Brian Johnson. He is trying to live for as long as possible. His catchphrase, if you will, is he's trying to live forever. So he is incredibly wealthy, and it's quite interesting to look at his daily routine. Now, he wakes up between 5 and 8 a.m. From what I've read, he wakes up about 4:30 or 4:40 in the morning. And this is quite interesting. He eats 3 meals within a 5-hour window. So he has lots of vegetables and natural foods, whole foods, and then he fasts for about 19 hours. So when you fast, you stop eating. Have you tried fasting? I've tried some intermittent fasting in the past, and it was quite beneficial. It was difficult in the beginning. I think it was like an 18-6, which is quite easy to do because I don't really eat anything in the morning. Then he goes to sleep at around 7:45 or 8 o'clock in a room with carefully controlled temperature. So he takes his sleep very, very seriously. Now, this is quite interesting because we have a morning routine. Do you have a bedtime routine? I know a lot of people say you should stay away from the screen at least an hour before you sleep. Is this something that you do? Why do you think it could be beneficial to stop looking at a screen before you are going to go to sleep? It'd be interesting to hear what you think. Taking pills. Wow, he takes 54 pills, a mix of supplements and off-label medication based on test results. That's very interesting. Do you take any supplements or medication or vitamin tablets? I like to take a vitamin tablet that I dissolve in water and some omega-3. Exercising, following a rigorous exercise plan. Undergoing treatments, so he undergoes experimental therapies. So this is something which I will go into in another lesson in a bit more depth. But this is nice to see as an overview of his daily routine. So the main takeaways we can see are that he wakes up early, incredibly early, and sleeps very early. And he doesn't eat for most of the day. So, very interesting because in today's society, we see food everywhere. At the moment, I'm trying to go to the gym as much as possible. And so I've increased my amount of protein and frequency of meals. So I'm not sure if I could fast for 19 hours. That seems quite a long time. Okay, very good. So, like I said, this is a spur of the moment live stream just to talk about daily routines. I wanted to get you thinking about your routine. This is something that you can practice with your thinking in English, and it's really helpful. It's helped so many of my students to improve their confidence because when you start to connect these sentences together, you can become more playful with it. You can imagine another person. You can imagine. Hello, my name is Harry, and this is Learn English with British Harry. How are you today? I hope you're well. So today we're going to have a discussion about wealth inequality. And before we do, I just want to remind you that I've created this fantastic ebook for you. It's completely free. You can find the link for it in the description. And it will really help you to improve your English. I've taught thousands of students, and the tips included have really helped my students. Now, with that said, let's have a look at this here. So this article here. So I'm going to read the first paragraph. So haves and have-nots, the 99%, the income gap, the chasm between rich and poor has never mattered more. It's estimated that the top 1% of the world's richest people owns 50% of the planet's wealth. So we can see here that a chasm is a gap. So you can see these two mountains here, and there's a big gap in between. So this signifies the huge difference, the huge gap between the haves and the have-nots, the rich and the poor. Solving this level of inequality is often held up as a grand challenge for the world. But is that the right way to look at it? Some researchers argued that income disparity itself may not be the main problem. The issue, they say, is not the existence of a gap between rich and poor, but the existence of unfairness. Some people are treated preferentially and others unjustly. And acknowledging that both poverty and unfairness are related may be the challenge that matters more in the 21st century. While many people already view inequality as unfairness, making the distinction much clearer is important to improve the society we live in. These researchers argue that we need to all be on the same page as to what inequality actually is. Only then can we direct resources to the places that matter. So, to be on the same page, what does this mean? If we think about a piece of paper or a page from a book, if people are reading from different pages, their level of understanding may be different. So, I have an example sentence here. So, before we make any decisions today, I'd like to make sure that everyone is on the same page. So, this phrase is very common and it's a very useful informal phrase to make sure that we all have the same level of understanding. So, if someone is not on the same page, then they can catch up and reach the same level. Okay, very good. So so far, if we have a look at what they are saying, so I think this is a very good practice. When you are reading an article, read a section and then ask yourself the question, what are they saying? Here we're reading for gist. Gist is to understand the general meaning. So we can understand that estimated that the top 1% of the world's richest people owns 50% of the planet's wealth. Now, 1% as a number is low. So whenever I see a number, I ask myself, is it high? Is it low? So 1% is low. However, in this case, it's relative because they're saying 1% owns 50%. Again, 50% is not that high compared to 90%. But if we think about the planet's wealth, if we think about how many people there are in the world, so we have, I think the last time I checked, 8 billion, there may be more, number may be growing. So if we say there are roughly 8 billion people, so half of that is 4 billion. So that's a gigantic number. It's just not a high number or very high. It's gigantic or it's huge. Okay. Then we can see they're trying to discuss how can we solve this issue. Okay, let's go to the next page here. What is it about inequality that bothers us? The fact that some people are rich and others are poor, or that not everyone has an equal shot, or something else? So this is quite interesting. So they're asking the question that what bothers us about inequality? Okay. In a paper published in April in the journal Nature Human Behavior called Why People Prefer Unequal Societies, a team of researchers from Yale University argue that humans, even as young children and babies, actually prefer living in a world where inequality exists. That's quite interesting. It sounds counterintuitive. So, why would that be? Because if people find themselves in a situation where everyone is equal, studies suggest that many become angry or bitter. If people who work hard aren't rewarded, or if slackers are over rewarded. So, this is quite fascinating here. Now, so the research says that young children and babies actually prefer living in a world where inequality exists. That's very strange to me because the general argument, the general feeling is that we want more equality. We want across the board, especially with wealth, we want more equality. So it sounds counterintuitive. So counterintuitive is in a way that is the opposite of what you would expect or what seems obvious. An example could be when you don't have time to exercise or meditate, is when you need to exercise and meditate the most. I think personally, this is true for myself. There are times when I don't want to exercise at all, but I find that this is the time where I have to exercise because if I don't feel like exercising, of course, if you have an injury, then don't exercise, recover, rest. But if it's just a feeling of laziness or I can't be bothered, pushing yourself builds that resistance. So you build that ability to keep going, you build that persistence, which is very important. But but here when they're saying that children and babies prefer, how do they know? It's interesting to me. How are they able to test if babies can understand inequality? Well, let's find out. But before we do, we have the word slacker. So a slacker is an informal word for a person who does not work hard. And also there's a nice word to describe an emotion, bitter. When you are bitter, you are feeling angry or resentful about something that happened in the past. For example, if a colleague at work got the promotion instead of you, you may feel bitter because you worked really hard. Maybe you were more qualified or had more experience or you had more hunger, but they chose someone else. So here you'd feel bitter. So feeling bitter is not a good thing because it holds you back. You're consumed with thinking about what should have been. Okay. For example, in one study, a group of 6 to 8 year olds was tasked with divvying up erasers among two boys who cleaned a room as rewards. Researchers found that if they told a group of children that both boys did a good job and then gave the group an odd number of erasers, the kids made the unanimous decision to throw away the extra eraser rather than give it to one of the boys as an unfair bonus. So here, divvying, this means to divide up. So this is quite interesting because the boys, they could have shared the erasers, or in the UK, call it a rubber. So they did not share the erasers, which is a bit strange. Why did they do that? Because they had extra. Okay. And yet, when the researchers told the kids that one boy worked harder than the other, the group awarded the extra prize to the harder worker. We argue that the public perception of wealth inequality itself being averse to most people is incorrect, and that instead, what people are truly concerned about is unfairness, says Christina Starmans, a psychology postdoc at Yale who worked on the paper. In the present day US and much of the world, these two issues are confounded because there is much inequality that the assumption is that it must be unfair. But this has led to an incorrect focus on wealth inequality itself as the problem that needs addressing rather than the more central issue of fairness. Starman's co-author, Mark Sheskin, a cognitive science postdoc at Yale, puts the findings of his research succinctly. People typically prefer fair inequality to unfair equality. That's a bit of a mouthful. So I want you to have a read through that while I have a sip of water. So he's saying, he's making the assumption that people typically prefer fair inequality to unfair equality. Firstly, I think it's a big assumption for him to make because he does not know every single person in the world to make this assumption. But it is interesting how people are making justifications for their assumptions. Okay. And don't worry, we will come back to this as well to summarize and also to get your thoughts. Okay, and thank you to the people for joining. Thank you for watching now. I really appreciate it. Okay, let's have a look here. So the reason this matters is that trying to create a world with no wealth disparity is at odds with people's perception of fairness, and that they could potentially lead to instability. A society where no poverty exists sounds rather utopian, but if that society is equal but unfair, then it risks collapsing, argues Nicholas Bloom, an economics professor at Stanford University. So, utopian is a world where it's like an imaginary world where people are happy and people have enough money. The opposite to this is a dystopian where people can think about the bad things that happen in the world. For example, things with AI or the environment, with climate change. But in a utopian society, humans thrive. We all care for each other. We are happy. We are achieving our goals. To say that it's utopian is almost dismissive because you think that it's not achievable, but I think it actually is. Okay, we'll go to the next paragraph. So, as reasonable as it sounds, people don't typically work, create, or strive without the motivation to do so, says Bloom. If I'm a painter, dentist, or builder, why would I work for 50 hours a week if everything I'm given is free? From my own experience managing people, humans actually think it's unreasonable for people that strive to get rewarded. So we had this word before, slacker, which is an informal word for someone that doesn't like to work. Skive means to avoid work. So here he's saying, he's giving the example. If he was a dentist and he had to work 50 hours, he wouldn't work as hard if he was given something for free. But you don't really know that. If we think of a world where everyone has an equal amount of money, so think about this. If every human in the world was given enough money to live, to own a piece of land or a piece of property, would they become lazy? Or would they want to be part of the community more? Would they think about how to improve, how to innovate? So here he's just giving his own personal opinion. Okay, let's go to the next paragraph. When you run large teams, there's nothing that sends people mad more than lazy individuals getting the same rewards and promotions as the hard workers. But how can we define inequality? Researchers argue that we need an agreed upon definition of the term inequality. It's important to remember that as we figure out ways to combat inequality, that there are three separate but related ideas. First, the idea that people should have equal opportunity in society, regardless of their background, race, sexuality, gender, and so on. The second idea is fair distribution, which says that benefits or rewards should be distributed fairly based on merit. The final idea is the notion of equality of outcome. So before I continue, I just want to go back here. Okay, so let's have a look at the 3 points. So he's saying first, the idea that people should have equal opportunity regardless of their background. I think that's good. So regardless of your background, um, your race, your sexuality, your gender, you should have a equal opportunity. But this isn't always the case because if you're born into a wealthy family, for example, they would have access to more resources, more opportunities. If you wanted to go for a job and your father or someone you know has connections, they can find a job for you, whereas the other person may find it more difficult. So this is more difficult to assess. The second idea, fair distribution. So distribution means to spread out. So we had that informal word divvy. So divvy is an informal word to mean that means to divide. So distribution is a more formal word for divvy. If we have fair distribution, then things are equally given out and also based on merit. So if we think about a democracy, for example, You also have a meritocracy. So a meritocracy is when people are judged based on the work that they produce. So in that case, you would choose someone who is the best qualified or has the most experience. Okay. So the last one is a little trickier to grasp. Many of the experts BBC Future talked to brought up the phrase inequality of outcome. Say if you were given £5 and your friend was given £10, that represents inequality of outcome since the two of you have different amounts of money regardless of how that came to be. Each of these ideas represent a different kind of inequality that manifests in everyday life and that contributes to the overarching megatrend that many regular people think of as economic inequality. Recognizing these different dimensions is crucial for formulating a holistic battle plan. So that's quite a mouthful there, but let's break this down together. So in this paragraph, they're saying that inequality manifests. Manifests means to create. So something comes out of something else. So it manifests as something different. So if you have something negative, it can manifest something positive. Overarching mega trend that regular people think. So here, it's something which contributes to something quite big. So recognizing this, formulating a holistic. So holistic is when you think about the total. For example, say if you are sick, maybe you have a headache, but you don't know why you have a headache. If you go to a traditional doctor, he may give you medicine like paracetamol, but if you look holistically at the whole body, it may be that you are stressed. It may mean that you may have issues with your digestive system, with your stomach. So holistic means to look at everything together, not just focusing on one specific thing. So which of these types of inequality should be addressed? Which leads to a potentially better society? Fighting the real issue, many of the researchers and economists interviewed, so let's go to the fact, attention is paid to the fact that the 1% and the super rich all exist. So this article is interesting because for me, they give the idea that it's not about the people who are very rich. They are not the problem because they've worked hard. It's the other people that haven't worked hard. So this is the general idea that I'm getting for the article from the article so far. Okay, so let's finish it off here. I do think that people are likely to respond with greater sympathy to the suffering brought on by poverty than to the harms necessarily imposed on those who are less wealthy than some others, Frankfurt says. This might support appropriate legislation to relieve the disadvantages of poverty. Economic inequality is such a massive, sprawling, nuanced, intensive issue. The product of the product. Hello, this is British Harry, and how are you today? I hope you're all well. And today I'm going to talk about New Year's resolutions. So we're already halfway into January, and how are your resolutions going so far? Have you managed to maintain them or have you dropped off? Now, it would be interesting to know what were your resolutions, or if you're still thinking about making them, what resolutions are you thinking of? So, some of the common topics can be health. So, for example, getting fit, getting healthy, maybe by going to the gym or stopping smoking. You could have relationships, so making your friendships stronger with your family or your friends or your partner. You also have career. Are you thinking about changing careers, for example? Or do you want to progress up the career ladder? So please let me know, what are your New Year's resolutions? A common phrase is to turn over a new leaf. So in a sentence, you could say, I really want to get fit. I'm tired of being unhealthy and I'm going to turn over a new leaf. Now, another phrase you could use is to hit the ground running. So you could use two together. You could say, I'm going to turn over a new leaf, I'm going to join the gym, and I'm going to hit the ground running. So to hit the ground running means that you're going to have lots of momentum. You're going to go 3 or 4 times a week, not once a week. Now, this can be good initially, but it could lead to burnout. So it's very common for lots of people to join the gym in January and then drop off. So you'll see a spike at the beginning of the year, and then there will be a steady decline or a sharp decline in the number of times people go to the gym. Maybe you're in a job that you really hate or that you don't like. You could say it's time to face the music and change. So this is another way to say I need to reflect on my choices and I need to actually make a change going forward. There could be someone that you know needs to make a change and they need to make a resolution, but they just won't. So you could say to them, the ball is in your court. You can give them a lot of advice, give them statistics and information, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to make the change. So the ball is in their court. I think making resolutions is a good thing because it forces you to go that extra mile. So when you go the extra mile, you force yourself. You just don't finish, you push yourself, which can give yourself the extra motivation. However, using January to make those resolutions can put a lot of pressure on yourself that I have to keep to this. And I think it depends on the individual. So there are a lot of pros and there are lots of cons, but ultimately I think it depends on the person. Coming off the back of Christmas and New Year's, a lot of people would have overindulged in a lot of food, chocolates, sweets, maybe alcohol. And so you may be feeling like you are ready for a change. In this case, you could say, I'm ready to bite the bullet and cut out fizzy drinks, for example, or to cut out sugar. On a personal note, my New Year's resolutions this year is to be healthier. So to go to the gym at least 4 times a week, to cut down on my caffeine. So I would try to stick to 1 or maximum of 2 cups of coffee a day, and try to cut out a lot of sugar, I think. So I have known that I need to be doing this for a long time, but it being January, it gives me that extra bit of motivation to think, okay, I need to really concentrate and focus on this, because with life, things get in the way. It's just natural to forget about it. And especially when you're tired or stressed, you may just think, okay, let me just have that chocolate or that piece of cake. But this keeps you focused and thinking, okay, where do I want to be in December? But I really think it's a lifestyle. A lot of companies take advantage of the fact that it is January. So we know gyms would offer special discounts, but a lot of food companies would offer special deals and discounts to encourage people to buy their product at this time of the year. But by having a regular, healthy lifestyle, I think it's something which is more sustainable. You can maintain it for longer. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. So please consider subscribing and like this button. And thank you so much. I will see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.